The crumpled piece of paper fell from Jacob's trembling hands as his eyes blurred with tears. He read the words again, his heart pounding in his chest. The note was short, but its impact was like a punch to the gut. Thank you for showing me kindness, even when it was hard for you. I hope one day someone does the same for you. Merry Christmas. Jacob staggered back into the leather chair in his lavish bedroom, the sound of muffled Christmas carols drifting from downstairs. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel the joy of the season, only guilt and regret. Jacob adjusted his designer scarf as he stepped out of the toy store, arms loaded with bags. The crisp winter air stung his face, but he barely noticed. The streets of the upscale shopping district were alive with holiday cheer. Twinkling lights adorned every storefront. Children laughed as they admired festive window displays, and the distant sound of carolers filled the air. But Jacob wasn't interested in any of it. His mind was on his new gaming console, the limited edition sneakers he'd snagged, and the luxury watch he'd convinced his father to buy for him. As he turned to hail a cab, a small, hesitant voice stopped him. "Excuse me, sir?" Jacob frowned and looked down. Standing before him was a young boy, maybe 10 years old. His coat was thin and worn, clearly meant for milder weather, and his sneakers were so battered they barely held together. The boy clutched a hand-drawn sign that read, "Please help. I just want to buy my sister a Christmas gift." His cheeks were red from the cold, but his eyes were filled with determination. Jacob sighed, already annoyed. "What do you want?" The boy took a step back, startled by the sharpness in Jacob's tone. I just need a little money," he stammered. "My sister, she's been sick, and I want to get her something special for Christmas." Jacob rolled his eyes. "Look, kid, I don't have time for this," he said, brushing past the boy. "Go bother someone else." The boy's face fell, but he didn't say anything. Jacob didn't look back as he walked toward his cab, his expensive boots crunching against the snow. But as he waited for the cab to arrive, Jacob felt a strange pang in his chest. He dismissed it quickly, telling himself he had no reason to feel guilty. He had worked hard, well, his father had worked hard, for everything he had. It wasn't his responsibility to take care of someone else's problems. By the time the cab pulled up, Jacob had convinced himself he'd done the right thing. He climbed in, ready to go home and enjoy his new toys, completely unaware of how much that brief encounter would soon change his life. The Christmas Eve party at Jacob's house was nothing short of extravagant. The mansion glowed with twinkling lights and garlands. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon wafted through the air, and laughter echoed from the grand hall, where guests mingled over glasses of champagne. Jacob sat near the towering Christmas tree, surrounded by a mountain of gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Yet despite the lavish atmosphere, Jacob felt oddly disconnected. He should have been thrilled. He had everything anyone could ever want. A house full of luxuries, parents who spared no expense to make him happy, and every new gadget and toy he'd wished for under the tree. Still, something gnawed at the edge of his mind, a faint discomfort he couldn't shake. It was the boy. Jacob hadn't thought much of their brief interaction at the time, but as the night wore on, the memory of the boy's worn coat and pleading eyes crept back into his thoughts. The way he'd looked so hopeful, only to deflate under Jacob's curt dismissal, lingered like a stain on his conscience. Jacob shook his head, trying to focus on the party. The next morning, Jacob woke up late, the sunlight streaming through his bedroom window. Christmas Day had arrived, and his parents were already downstairs preparing for the family brunch. As Jacob got out of bed, something on the floor near his door caught his attention, a small plain envelope. Curious, he picked it up and noticed the words "Merry Christmas" scrawled on the front in shaky handwriting. Frowning, Jacob opened the envelope and unfolded the note inside. The message was simple, written in the same unsteady hand. "Thank you for showing me kindness, even when it was hard for you. I hope one day someone does the same for you. Merry Christmas." Jacob's heart sank. He read the note again, his mind racing. Who had left it? What did it mean? A knot formed in his stomach as he thought back to the boy outside the toy store. The weight of the words hit him hard, and for the first time, he felt a twinge of regret so strong it brought tears to his eyes. Jacob couldn't get the note out of his mind. Its words played on a loop, tugging at him in ways he didn't fully understand. Who could have left it, and why did it feel so personal? The memory of the boy outside the toy store haunted him. His pleading eyes now burned into Jacob's mind. Unable to ignore the nagging guilt, Jacob decided he needed answers. He bundled up in his designer coat and scarf, stepping out into the frosty morning. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew he had to return to where it all started. The streets were quieter now, the festive buzz of Christmas Eve replaced by a calm, peaceful silence. Snow blanketed the ground, and the shop windows still twinkled with lights, though fewer people passed by. Jacob approached the spot where he had last seen the boy, scanning the area for any sign of him. He spotted a street vendor setting up his stall nearby and approached him. "Excuse me," Jacob said, clearing his throat. "Have you seen a boy around here, about 10 years old, wearing a thin coat? He was holding a sign a few days ago." The vendor paused, squinting at Jacob. "Yeah, I know the kid," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "He's been around here a lot lately. Nice boy, always polite. He's trying to take care of his little sister. She's been sick." Jacob felt a lump form in his throat. "Do you know where he lives?" The vendor nodded toward a rundown apartment building a few blocks away. "That way, but don't expect much. The family doesn't have much to their name." Jacob thanked the man and hurried toward the building. Each step felt heavier than the last. The reality of the boy's struggles hit him harder with every snow-covered street he crossed. When Jacob reached the building, he hesitated, unsure of what to do next. The guilt that had started as a faint ache now consumed him. He had dismissed the boy so easily, yet here he was, determined to make things right. Jacob took a deep breath, stepping toward the building to face the consequences of his actions. Jacob stood outside the weathered apartment building, its brick walls cracked and faded with age. The cold winter wind bit at his face, but he barely noticed. Clutching a brightly wrapped gift he had hastily purchased that morning, Jacob hesitated, his heart pounding. What if the boy didn't want to see him? What if it was too late to make amends? Summoning his courage, Jacob stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The air smelled of dampness and old wood. He climbed the creaking stairs, guided by the vague directions the street vendor had given him. At the top floor, he stopped in front of a door with peeling paint. He raised his hand to knock but paused, listening. Inside, he could hear a soft, sweet voice, likely the boy, humming a Christmas carol. Another voice, weaker but full of joy, giggled in response. Jacob's chest tightened. He knocked gently, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. The door opened a crack, and the boy's face appeared. For a moment, confusion flickered in his eyes, then recognition. "It's you," he said softly, his expression unreadable. Jacob knelt slightly to meet the boy's gaze. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he began, his voice heavy with regret. "I shouldn't have walked away that day." He held out the gift. "This is for your sister, and for you." The boy's eyes widened in surprise, then softened. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I was wrong," Jacob admitted. "I didn't understand, but I do now. You didn't deserve to be ignored." The boy hesitated, then opened the door wider. Behind him, a frail little girl sat on a makeshift bed, her face lighting up at the sight of the gift. "Is that for me?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Jacob nodded, his throat tightening. "Merry Christmas." The boy took the gift, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As Jacob left the building, he felt a warmth he hadn't known before. It wasn't just the act of giving, it was the realization that kindness, even delayed, could still make a difference. The next morning, Jacob couldn't shake the events of the previous day. Sitting by the window of his luxurious bedroom, he watched the snow fall gently, blanketing the city in white. For the first time, the gifts piled under the extravagant Christmas tree downstairs didn't seem to matter. Jacob replayed the boy's face in his mind, the mix of shock, gratitude, and something else, something deeper. It wasn't just the gift that had mattered, it was the acknowledgement, the apology, and the recognition of his humanity. Feeling restless, Jacob decided to return to the toy store district. He couldn't ignore the pull to do more. Stopping at the same vendor he'd spoken to before, Jacob asked about the boy's family situation. The vendor revealed that the family had been struggling for years. The boy's mother worked long hours, but with his sister's illness, it was never enough. This time, Jacob didn't hesitate. He spent the entire day gathering resources, groceries, warm clothing, and even a month's rent for the family. He delivered the items anonymously, leaving them at their door with a simple note. "Merry Christmas to the kindest family I've ever met. You inspire me." The joy Jacob felt as he walked away was unlike anything he'd experienced before. It wasn't the fleeting excitement of a new gadget or the satisfaction of a gift for himself. It was the warmth of knowing he had made a difference in someone else's life. That day marked a turning point for Jacob. The boy and his sister had unknowingly taught him the true meaning of Christmas. It wasn't about what you had, but what you gave. From that moment on, Jacob committed himself to acts of kindness, big and small, throughout the year. This story reminds us all of the power of kindness and the importance of looking beyond ourselves, especially during the holiday season. Have you ever considered how a simple act of compassion could change someone's life, or even your own? This Christmas, take a moment to extend a helping hand, whether big or small. Share this story to spread the message of hope and generosity, and let's make the world a kinder place, one act at a time.